In this week's episode of Let's Talk About It, we're going to start off with an entertainment segment exploring the new phenomenon of art that insists upon itself. And we're also going to share where in the world we got that phrase. Then, in our relationship segment, we'll make a case against the trend of using vibes to make judgments about people. We'll explore the question, are vibes a good standard for making relationship decisions? You're here. You've joined us. Now let's talk about it.
Well, hello there.
Hi there.
And welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About It. I'm Malcolm Morgan.
And I'm Micah Morgan.
How are you doing, my love?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good today. Today was an interesting day.
Okay.
But I'm good. How are you?
I am tired, but I am happy to be doing this with you. It's been an interesting week. It was a long day, a full day today of problem solving and obstacle overcoming. There it is. Obstacle overcoming. And, this is a nice reprieve from that. Where we can just talk about stuff.
Yeah.
Or talk about it, if you will.
If you will.
Yes. Shout out to everybody listening to us on whatever podcasting platform you enjoy. And special shout out to our YouTube audience. Thank you for joining us. We've started this YouTube Odyssey on this season. Guys, sad note, this is the season finale of Let's Talk About It. Season finale, season 5. We are wrapping up. But great news. There will be another season 6 will start this year. So stay tuned for dates on that.
Yep. It will.
It will. Because we love you so much.
Y'all, Malcolm is the planner in this relationship. So whenever he says things will happen, I just follow. So, yes.
She acts like we haven't already planned this. She just doesn't remember.
I forgot.
We've already planned this.
I
and
apologize.
She forgot, so.
But I'm with you. I'm with you now. See?
We're talking about
it.
And today's it, I think, is a passion project of yours.
Oh.
This really came from one of your soapboxes.
Rants.
And I think it's really, recent documentary that we watched has sparked this. But art that insists upon itself.
What does that mean, Malcolm? Where did we get that phrase?
So for those of you that are Family Guy fans, there is a wonderful episode where the family is stuck in a escape. We'll call it escape room.
Oh, yeah.
Call it escape room. And they're just having conversation that they've never had before. And they start talking about their favorite movies. Somebody brings up The Godfather, and Peter says, don't like The Godfather. And everybody in his family is like, what do you mean you don't like The Godfather? He's like, it insists upon itself. And they get into a big argument. Everybody's just yelling at him. And that's his point, is that it insists upon itself. So that's where this phrase comes from. It insists upon itself. And Micah, my lovely wife, loves this phrase and uses it all the time when we're talking about just about anything that we watch.
It's like salt.
Anything that she doesn't like.
Just, it insists upon itself.
It doesn't even mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything, and it means everything. So what had happened was I have been using this phrase so much and for so many things that don't fit it well that it wasn't until we watched a recent documentary that it was like, finally, this phrase actually, like, I even gave Malcolm a preface. I was like, listen, I know that I've overdone it with this phrase for most of our relationship, but I really think it fits in this situation. This documentary insists upon itself. So before I actually say what documentary it was, I do think we do need a disclaimer because we're getting ready to talk about art, which is very much like people's passion projects, right? Like people put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
And we eviscerate them weekly on this show.
No.
Continue, I'm sorry.
That's the opposite of what I was going to say.
And we love all of you.
I want to offer the disclaimer that we understand that when art is going to be, or what is it? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So this is any of the critique that we're about to embark on is not a critique of the people who made it.
For the most part, yes.
For the most part, I think, no, we can accurately say that.
Okay.
It's, I think, an exploration of the art itself and an admission that these are not objective statements.
Okay.
Okay. So.
See, once you get passionate, if you still feel that way.
I'm going to try to regulate myself.
If you're this understanding as we get deeper into this.
And you guys, grace, Lord
pay attention,
Jesus.
you know. Check us if we're not being these people that
Help
she
me,
has
Lord.
described.
Help me, Lord. Okay, so where do we want to start now that I offered our disclaimer?
So I think this is for us something that we've noticed in the movies and television and documentaries that you watch is that there's this trend of movies that are trying to be artsy.
Too artsy.
You know, I think we watch quite a bit of movies and we'll watch trailers and be like, oh, we'll give this a chance. But we've also gotten pretty good at looking at it and saying, there's about a 80% chance this is going to be bad, judging by what they're trying to do in the trailer.
And we still watch it, though. We hate watch sometimes. Yeah.
Sometimes. It depends. There's a risk involved with taking in a movie.
Yeah.
And especially if it's like the first movie, it's like you have a choice of one, like you can't make up for it later. Like, okay, this better be good. And if you mess it up, the whole thing is ruined.
Especially if I've paid to sit through this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if it's like a late night and you're like, okay, we got time to watch one thing, like, okay, this needs to be worth it because we can't make up for it later, you know? So there's some movies that we cite as examples of this. One of the recent, very highly lauded, and a movie that a lot of people really loved was Poor Things. We tried to watch it, you guys. We really did. And it was just a lot.
How do I calmly say this?
Remember all that stuff you said about this?
I know.
It's about the art. It's not
It's
about
the art. It's about the art.
It's not about the people.
I think... So, by the way, we're not going to go through summaries of all these movies. We're just going to describe the element of it that we believe kind of illustrates this insisting upon itself. With Poor Things, I think there was this attempt at shock value just for the sake of shock value with the main storyline, which, spoiler alert, involved putting the brain of an infant into an adult woman's body and then chronicling her basically
coming of age
through her sexuality, right? There's many ways that you can explore coming of age for a human, but they chose sexuality. And for me, remembering that this is an infant made it very difficult to watch this movie. And it wasn't just like, oh, she had like her first kiss. That's cute. It was porn. So
that's an example of them trying to be artsy and cool and stuff. Another one, a movie that we were actually really looking forward to seeing when it came out.
Yeah.
Because sorry guys, we love cult documentaries.
I know, they're
cult
so
television
good.
shows, cult movies. We just love it. Midsummer. We were really excited about that movie. And we're left the theater very disappointed and mostly appalled by what we saw.
I mean, there was murder of old people and
murder of young people,
just generally murder. There was wearing a bear's skin,
something like that
at some point.
Fertility sex
that happened, and there was like a lot of psychedelic use as well. Just watching people take trips.
I mean, that's whatever. Yeah. It seems like it was the lowest of the issues in that movie, actually.
You know what? I'll give you that. Let's cross that off the list.
Other than people making bad general life decisions as well.
Yeah. So whereas with Poor Things, there was the shock value through pornographic imagery.
Which there was also in Midsummer.
The additional thing, I think, was it just like, what did it mean? Right? Like there were all of these elements that were grotesque and shocking. And then you end the movie wondering, okay, what was the meaning of it all? And so I think that was kind of the hook for that one.
Yeah. And then another one that we watched recently on Hulu called Skinamarink. You guys, if you hadn't heard already, Micah loves horror movies. And so we will try some stuff, even though my opinion is that most horror movies are bad. This one was really bad. Yeah. But they're trying to do like artsy stuff with sound and video.
And camera angles.
And it was just dark. And it involved two kids being left home alone for some reason. And some poltergeist or something was in its home. And it was just dark and weird. And
there was barely any movement in the plot. So there were just long stretches of no visual activity really at all. And so kind of similar to Midsummer. What did it mean?
That's another one we didn't finish. It was like, okay, this is just...
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll sit and be like, okay, maybe the payoff will be worth it. Like maybe the twist will be worth it. No. And that one, it was like, yeah, this is it. This is going to end disappointingly. Like the lights are just going to come on and the parents are going to be there and it's just going to be over.
We lasted pretty long for that one, though.
We did. But yeah, we lasted longer than we did in Poor Things.
Poor Things, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so what sparked this was the documentary / movie on HBO about the play Slave Play.
Yeah.
Which we did not see the play, had not really heard of it, to be honest. But the trailer looked interesting.
It really did.
And it even started out interesting. But then when we got into the nitty gritty of understanding the person who wrote it and what the documentary was about, it just fell short in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think... So we're commenting on the documentary, not the play, right? Because we've already said that we haven't seen the play.
Although the play looks...
Yeah, I don't... Okay. I want to be kind.
Remember what you said, all those things
I'm remembering. It's right here. It's right here.
Okay, just want to... Do you want me to play it? I can...
You can't play it.
Well, they wouldn't know that I didn't play it.
That's true.
So thanks.
I mean... Never
Spoiler
mind.
alert.
Of course he can play it, y'all.
Wow.
So the thing about the documentary is there was this air of almost like criticism of the audience if you don't enjoy it. Like there was this kind of like provocation with every movement of the documentary. There was like 3 movements of the documentary, and there was just this discussion of the play that, I'm sorry, it insisted that this is so good that you just have to be enthralled with it. And there wasn't a clear enough like storyline communicated of the play and of the documentary itself. Like, what story is this documentary trying to tell about the play? That as you're being sent that message by the playwright, it's kind of like, I feel disrespected as an audience member. Like, why are you coming at me like this? And I don't feel like you've fully explained why I should be bought in.
Yeah.
There was just then this assumption that I should be bought in.
Yeah. I think one of the big things about this trend in art is it seems like it's art just for art's sake.
Yeah.
Like just wanting to be artsy, just wanting to be fun. And by extension of that, it's art for artists, not for a general audience.
That's
right?
a good point.
That's who you're appealing to. That's who you want to you're kind of winking to when you do these things. You want to make it so deep, so multi-layered, so abstract that your fellow artists going to be like, oh yeah, even if the audience is kind of like offended or confused or just it goes over their head completely.
Yeah, which then makes me ask, what do we think as a society? What are we agreeing is the function of art? Like, what is art supposed to achieve? In my mind, art is supposed to be beautiful. But in order for it to be beautiful, there needs to be this shared understanding of what is beautiful and what should be awe-inspiring, which means that we should be able to understand it. Like, at minimum, we should all walk away knowing the gist of what the main point of your art is. And I think there's this trend of almost a competition of seeing how abstract and ununderstandable you can make your art, to the point where you're alienating your kind of average Joe and Jill.
I think something that comes to mind in this conversation is a quote by Caesar Cruz says, art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable.
Interesting.
So I think it gets back to the core of this is that that tension and uncomfortability. And if you're uncomfortable, well, then you need to be uncomfortable. And if you get it, you get it.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It's one of those, like, you know, the phrase, it's probably a millennial phrase at this point, if you know, you know. And if you don't, you just don't.
Yeah. But is that, I don't know. Maybe I'm just obsessed with, like, hospitality. Like, shouldn't art be hospitable? Like, shouldn't we welcome folks into the art? And, you know, oh, do you need some water? Let me get you some water, you know? I just don't feel that sometimes with these kinds of movies where it's just like, well, if you don't get it, that's sucks to be you.
Well, even think about how we think of, you use the word welcoming. Like, some people think welcoming people into their space is greeting them at the door and offering them something to drink.
Okay.
For some people, welcoming people in their space is leaving the door unlocked, and you can go and use the fridge however you want.
That's fair.
And so that's two different examples of the same end being met, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of, when you try to apply that to this lesson, obviously this art is to make a point, but maybe not. Maybe it just isn't the point in the direction that we want it to be in, especially if it's not toward us. If it's not something that is made for us to easily digest, obviously we're not going to enjoy it as much. But if that person met their target audience and their target audience enjoyed it, was it a success?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a solid counter argument. I just don't like it.
I think another extension of the conversation about art for artists is it's art that's not trying to be understood. You know, I think people that create art for art's sake love the open-endedness of the conversation and don't necessarily want to give you definite meanings for what different symbols or different conversations or different things mean. They may give you the initial thought and say, well, what did you think? And they're much more apt to just let you think what you want about the piece, unless you get so far off that they're like, okay, well, you went the opposite direction completely of what's going on.
Which makes me think of Jordan Peele and I think it was Nope, where he just kind of let some of the theories float, and then eventually he kind of sort of, he told us which direction to go into. Yeah, that makes me wonder then if I am not being fair, if I'm maybe being unfair by lumping art and storytelling together, because I think what you just described is a fair description of art. Like, here's this visual presentation. I'm going to set it on this pedestal. You are welcome to project onto it whatever you want. We'll leave it at that. Storytelling, however, I think has a desire to pull people along toward the same goal and communicate the same message to everyone. Like, there's opportunity for people to explore metaphor within a story in different ways. But for the most part, if you're storytelling, you want people to understand pretty much the main stuff. Yeah. So I wonder if I'm being a little unfair in that regard. Like, when I think about slave play, for example, I think there were moments, can you help me remember a playwright's name? That makes me sad because I want to respect him. Thank you, Jeremy. I think there was a moment where they were really being vulnerable with just the process, right? This is what it took for me to write this, and these are my hopes for how this will be experienced by the audience. And so I think that's art in my mind. Like, I don't think there was really this maybe deep commitment to this linear storytelling, but that it was like, here's this product that I've really poured myself into. I'm going to let folks immerse themselves in it and pull away from it however they do.
Again, we're not talking about the play, though. We're talking about the documentary.
Right.
And I think one of the things that happened in the documentaries, there's this, he pulls in, I believe it's the original cast that did the original version of the play. And they watched the trailer for this documentary / movie. And then he asked them, what do they think the show is about? And all of them laugh and don't really have an answer.
Yeah.
And then they ask him, and he's like, that's a great question, but never really answers it.
Right. But doesn't that kind of prove my point? that he was kind of welcoming this experience of you just project onto this whatever you want. No?
I don't think so. I mean, if he would have said that, I think that would have. I think it's one of those things again that if you know, you know. And so it's like, that's a great question. I mean, I know what it's about, and I think the people that need to know what it's about know what it's about, and the people that don't, because they didn't really address it.
They didn't really tell us. Yeah, it was kind of a mysterious.
They didn't even have a conversation
joke
about it. Like they didn't even.
This is what this is about.
And I'm sure they probably recorded them actually giving answers to the question.
They cut it out,
and they didn't even use it. So they didn't even give us an opportunity to be a part of the conversation. It's like a conversation. We teased a conversation that never really happened.
Yeah.
Like, hey, like your mom, you get in trouble at school. You wait till your dad gets home, but then dad never comes home. And you just sitting there in fear, waiting stressful. At any moment.
It's the worst kind of suspense. Please, Dad, come home. Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah. So what would we say then are some ways that like this trend makes audiences uncomfortable? Like what are some patterns in the ways that it's doing it?
I think a big thing, particularly in the examples that we gave, is a lot of sexuality in storytelling, using that as a storytelling device.
Wait a minute. That's too generous.
Okay.
Because it is not a device the way this is happening. At this point.
Depends on how you define device.
At this point, it's just putting garlic powder on stuff that don't need garlic powder.
First of all, that's a cuss word. Everything can have garlic powder. So,
you're not going to put garlic powder on an ice cream sundae.
Okay. Oh, Mike, that's okay. Of course. You took the craziest example.
That's what I'm trying to say.
But normal food
should have garlic powder.
I would encourage you to put garlic powder on.
But that's what I'm saying is when it's showing up in these movies, it's either completely disconnected from what was just happening. It literally feels like the screenwriter and the director were just like, we haven't seen sex in a while. Let's just throw it in. Or it's this attempt to be deep and to communicate something about intimacy or relationships that really didn't need a sex scene. Like you could have done it in a more artful way, but you just decided to put two naked people on the screen. So that's what I'm trying to communicate by saying it's garlic powder on an ice cream sundae, because you didn't need that.
But using that as an example, for you, there is very few, i.e. never a reason to use garlic powder.
Yes.
So
yeah,
that's why I would not call sexuality garlic powder, because garlic powder.
Because some people would say, "Oh yeah, like sex is art, and you should have it in some places." And you know what? To everyone their own. I personally don't feel like sex scenes are my business. I don't want to be in somebody else's bedroom.
It's true. She does not.
I don't. I passionately don't. I just want to be in my own bedroom. And so I have a very low threshold for sex scenes. But for this particular niche of movies, I would even want to have a conversation with someone who is comfortable with sex scenes and ask them, like, did this need that? My hunch is that some of them would say no. That, I haven't taken the data yet.
It's okay. We'll do a survey.
So what else?
The impulse to offend just to prove a point. Like, what is the wildest thing that we can put in here? What is the most extreme version of this metaphor, or the most extreme perversion of this idea that is going to get people's attention?
Midsummer, throwing old people off of a cliff. Example.
It's a great example.
Like, the idea that's trying to be conveyed is how expendable people are. And they said, let's take it all away. Let's throw some people off a cliff. The most vulnerable people we have.
Yeah.
Other than children, which I think would have gotten the movie canceled.
If it had been dogs, that would have got the movie canceled.
Yeah, dogs and children. Yeah. Yep. So we had the provocative sex scenes, just like being offensive just to be offensive. And I think there's just the, as a third one, just a general, kind of like we said earlier, just the abstractness just because. either through the use of like camera play, just kind of using really artsy camera angles, and then you're sitting there for 3 minutes like, I think them panning the camera this way should mean something, but I don't really know. Or the use of color that doesn't really have like a linear connection to the story, lighting that doesn't really make sense, just like getting really abstract visually without kind of letting the audience in on, hey, this is what this means.
I hate darkness just to be dark.
Yeah.
Like, no, I think that was one of the things I didn't like about Skinamarink is that it was just dark.
And you couldn't
and
see
you weren't
anything.
hiding anything or necessarily getting ready to reveal something. It was just dark all the time. And you're just like, okay, I mean, I'd like to see something every once in a while. Like, I don't know if we remember this. This is OG Game of Thrones. I think it was in the last season, and it might have even been that last fight with the Night King, and everybody was just like, why is it so dark? I can't see what's happening.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the internet was just like, what is going on? Like, I understand it's at night, but can we get a little filter or something? So
Spotlight or something.
Like, geez.
Yeah, yeah. And I think because, again, like what I said before, we have developed a shared language of watching movies where we know, okay, if something's dark, the director is supposed to be building suspense here. Or like you said, concealing something in anticipation of a big reveal. So when you don't use that device the same way.
When it doesn't pay off.
Yeah, when it doesn't pay off, now I'm just sitting there stressed out and I don't really know why. And so like I think what's happening maybe is there are some directors that can do that really well. They can play with those really well. But I think it's because they throw in enough of them that the audience understands, that the audience has built trust. And so when they don't use it the way it's usually used, we're okay with it.
Yeah.
But when the whole movie does it, it's just kind of like...
It's a lot.
Yeah. I feel like y'all sitting at the dinner table talking about an inside joke and you've never let me in.
So here's a question that I think I want to get to before we transition off this topic. Is there a space for art's sake?
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask.
That's why you're exactly the right person to ask.
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
I'm sorry. And the only reason, if there wasn't so much violence and so much disconnection between people, I think we could get away with art for art's sake. But I think at this point in human history, we need art that's going to inspire people to be the best versions of themselves.
Wow.
And if you're not doing that, my kind words, when art does not do that, it risks being a part of the problem.
Wow. That's good. I am actually going to present a counterpoint.
I know you will.
So as a musician and a person who tries to sing every once in a while or does it for their job, whatever.
Being modest.
As a worship leader, I'm always looking for music that's practical, like music that I could do on a Sunday morning in my church with the skill level of the band that I have. And that's how the lens through I look through a lot of music. But every once in a while, I do love to hear an album where the musicians like went in their bag. And like, this music is not music that I can do at all for any reason, but I love this album. I love what they're doing musically. It is so unique, so fun. It is a tour for my ears to just hear the skill level. We can never do this at church. There's absolutely no application for this in a service. I can't even think of a situation in which I would want to do this song, but I love it. And so I think that's where I see art for art's sake, taking it out of movies and television where we started, but looking at music, for example. I love to hear musicians where they really get into their creative bag and can do some really unique things. Yeah,
but that's beauty to me. And beauty inspires joy. And joy is what we need right now. So I would say that you and I are actually saying the same thing. When art can be beautiful, I think that's inherently inspiring. But when art is confusing and there's no invitation for shared communication and there's no explicit invitation to be better, I'm just like, oh, okay.
I would say that there is an expression and communication happening. It's just with a smaller group.
That's fair. Yeah, that's
movies.
fair.
I mean, if you even go and read some of the reviews for these movies that we talked about, there's people that love the movie and love what it communicated and love the message and see and hear things that I don't see and hear. And that conversation is happening there, but it is not happening for me.
That's fair.
And so I think art for art's sake needs to exist to feed certain creatives, certain people. Otherwise, you know, a lot of the art they consume would not be as satisfying.
Okay. I'll give you that.
But hey, guys, it's not just up to us. It's not just what we think. We'd love to hear what you think about this. Is there a space for art's sake? What are some examples of movies that you've seen that you were just like, y'all are doing too much? You are insisting upon yourself. Hit us up. Use the hashtag Talk About It POD on social media. And we'd love to hear what you think about art for art's sake.
Indeed.
All right, where are we going next, love?
I think we're going to have a brief conversation about vibes.
Vibes. Good vibes only. Hashtag vibes.
So I know we've all, at this point, if you're on social media, maybe you're not, which good for you.
If you have any good Gen Zers in your life, you've definitely heard.
You've eventually at some point you've heard it, where people kind of declare the good vibes only, you know, kind of like what you said, or they just proudly declare that like if they sense or even get a whiff of some bad vibes, they're cutting people off. And whenever I see this, it's kind of like the therapist in me has always been like skeptical, like, I don't know if that's like the healthiest way to talk about relationships. So what I want to do is to just kind of make a case against vibes today.
The case against vibes.
The case.
Is this a Lee Strobel book?
The
case against vibes.
I like his books.
I know, but his books were the case for Christ.
Okay, but you're not making fun of them because I really
no.
Like them.
I'm just. This would have been a very unique book, like the case for Christ, the case for the case for vibes.
So, yeah, when you've seen the whole, you know, trend around vibes, like what has come to mind for you?
What comes to mind? I hate the word vibes. That's what comes to mind. I hate the word vibes because it literally means nothing and is used so broadly that it even lessens the definition even more than nothing somehow. It's so I don't know if this is Gen Z or maybe even a step like a generation before where everybody was talking about, oh, your aura is off. That's what it feels like.
I think that was us.
No, that was generation before. Our generation was energy.
I think we were aura too.
We were definitely, but we were
bad energy.
Definitely energy.
Yeah.
And so it's this generation's energy. Like, oh, I don't like your energy. Yeah, I was at that party and the energy was all off.
Yeah.
Like it's that same pseudo mystical, pseudo intuitive, pseudo emotional. Like,
those are good descriptors.
It's just pseudo everything and so nothing.
Yeah, it's not quite anything all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, when I've heard it, I've assumed that people were just using the term to just say, oh, I've got like a bad feeling and I'm just going to go based off of that feeling. But I think you said something pretty interesting the last time we were chatting about it that made me open up my eyes to ask the question. Maybe I'm being unfair in my assumptions in terms of how people are using the term. Do you remember what you said?
Wow, that's really...
Okay, hold on.
Sometimes you like alley-oop the ball and I can like get it.
I know.
And sometimes you alley-oop it and I'm like, I don't know. Was that for me?
Okay, I think what I remember you saying is that when you have seen people use the phrase, it's not just like a vague catch-all, but that you think people are using the word in the place of other words.
Oh, yeah, you said it. That's how I said it before. Okay. Yeah, now I remember. Now that you've said what I said exactly,
that's exactly okay.
I remember saying that. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, vibes has become this catch-all term. So instead of using like, oh, that person is toxic, or they started fighting in there. Like, no, the vibes were off. Like, you mean the fight broke out at the thing?
At the party?
That's what it was?
Those are vibes.
You mean he yelled at his girlfriend the whole time? That you guys were at dinner? That's not vibes.
That's something violence. You should call the police for, actually. So
like, his vibe was off. You mean when he pushed you out of the car and drove away?
Yeah.
The vibes were off? No, girl. He
He's abusive.
Yeah, he pushed you out of the car.
Yeah, that's yeah. And so that really helped me to like, oh, okay, maybe there is kind of this code that's being used, and it's not just like I don't really feel like doing the work of exploring what it is. I'm just misappropriating a word. So that's softened.
But that's
me a
what we
little.
do as humans, is that we find a word and then we just run it into the ground and use it. Like, remember when everybody was toxic? Like, anyone disagreed with you, they were toxic.
That wasn't
My
too
boss
long
is
ago.
toxic. I tried to take 3 weeks off to go to Jamaica, and he's just being so toxic and narcissistic.
No.
First of all, we should have never taught y'all narcissistic, because we was just using it for everything.
Yeah, that's an actual diagnosis that you need training to be able to. Yeah. So with the softening and with the compassion, let's try and answer the question. Are those things still like a good standard for making decisions in relationships? Because I think even so, like, even if there's this replacement of like vibes for this person is like crossing boundaries, or vibes for this person is like a little violent and aggressive, are there different ways to go about these conversations than just saying, oh, those are bad vibes, I'm out? Yeah.
I think really defining, be able to really use, I think one of the things that you have helped me with is using feeling words to be able to attach a feeling to what's happening, right? And so when we say vibes, it takes the emotion out of it. You know, if you felt saying the vibes were off instead of saying, oh, I felt unsafe, that's a much different conversation.
That's vulnerable.
Like, the vibes were off, well, he just got really sad and I felt uncomfortable. That's different.
Yeah.
So I think we really have to be much more specific about what we're seeing, what we're feeling, what other people are feeling in those moments. Because when we just say the vibes were bad, or the vibes were off, or I didn't like the vibe, that just doesn't communicate enough information that I feel like you can make a really good decision from.
Yeah. And too, I think you just softened me up a little bit more, because to admit something like that can take a lot of vulnerability.
Oh, absolutely.
And maybe vibes, and the spaces that we're seeing the conversation, right, is very public. It's on social media. It's where a whole bunch of people can see. So maybe using the phrase "the vibes were off" is a way to like put just a little bit of distance between yourself and what actually happened, so that you don't feel as exposed.
Yeah.
And I think there's some fairness to that,
Yeah.
especially on social media.
Yeah.
But my hope, which I don't really have a way to prove this is happening or not, is that people really are like, okay, when you close the door and you and your girls are talking, are you able to be fully honest? Because if not, then I agree that you're just using very limited data to make sometimes really big decisions.
And that's the fear, obviously, is that if we just don't have any space where we can be really vulnerable and really get to those root causes and feel comfortable talking about those things.
Yeah.
Or if we don't have are we not developing the language to be able to have those conversations, right? And so that is why our vocabulary is so limited when we talk about these things, and we end up talking about vibes, aura, and energy. Those are the things that concern you when it comes to this conversation. Because yes, it's right. It is a vulnerable space to admit those feelings, to admit those emotions that you're feeling. But is it that, or is it a combination of that, and we just don't have the language to really communicate well?
And we don't want to do the work to develop that language, because it takes time, like you said, to search within yourself and ask the question, what was it exactly that person did that made me uncomfortable or irritated or frustrated, whatever uncomfortable emotion it was? That takes time and effort.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just easier to be like, yeah, bad vibes, I'm out.
Right.
And I guess what worries me, in addition to what you said, is that we will become just like a harsher society toward one another, where we're just
cutting people off.
Just cutting people off and making these snap judgments, and that's it. And
sometimes those situations that we say the vibes are off, it's a person that needs help.
Often.
Like, it's not just a person that's being
malicious.
That's being belligerent or malicious.
Yeah.
But it's a person that actually is crying out for help and needs help. And it gets uncomfortable, and it's like, well, vibes are off. I'm done.
And I guess that's what's heartbreaking about it, is that oftentimes when the vibes are off, like you said, it's a person who hasn't had enough people be honest and gentle enough with them to give them a chance to change. Yeah. And I've certainly been in a space where I've been unhealthy and I needed people to be like, I think you need to, like, I still love you, but you're a little, and had they not done that, I wouldn't have gotten my healing. Yeah. Yeah. So as we close, what could be some recommendations? Like, let's say someone was listening to this conversation and they were like, you know what? I'm going to give not talking about vibes a try. What might we invite them to replace it with?
Read a book. No.
Oh, no. What show is that from?
I can't remember. I want to say it was Boondocks.
Was it Boondocks?
Not. It was something else. It was something else, and I'm not going to.
Oh, mercy. Yeah, let's not. Mm-hmm.
But read a book, kids.
Books are great.
Dictionaries, the sources, they're all good books.
Yeah,
I think, what was the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know, making us get off track.
I'm sorry.
What might we invite someone to replace vibes with if we're telling them? Yeah.
I think those feeling words we talked about.
Okay. Yep. Get in touch with your feelings.
I felt this, even if it's saying I felt uncomfortable.
That's a good start.
That's a good start. It can at least start the conversation. I think that's important, and being specific. You know, it may take a little bit more energy. It may take you to really, really think a lot harder, but being much more specific, I think that'll help you make a informed decision, and then help those around you understand the situation and process it with you as well. Yeah,
and I appreciate you brought up that last part, because that was going to be one thing that I would have added, which is like replace it with a desire to like let people know how they're coming across. Like, I think, like we said, most people might not even know. So that could be a gift that you can give someone. I think another thing to replace it with is like values, is really searching within yourself to ask the question, okay, what is important to me? What feels like non-negotiables for a relationship, whether that's a friendship or a romantic relationship, instead of just being like, oh, well, if there's bad vibes, then I'm off. And it's like, no, I think a more concrete way to make those decisions is according to your values.
And that'll help you also see patterns.
Exactly.
Patterns in your relationships, patterns for what makes you disconnect from relationships. And then you can start to address some of these things that may be addressable.
Exactly. And I think one last one would just be grace, like replacing vibes with grace, and just really understanding that none of us are perfect. And we all need that opportunity to try again at some point. And so wanting to give people that desire, I think wanting to give people that chance to try again, I think will just make all of society a little bit better.
It will. So in review, today we talked about art for art's sake. We talked about the recent trend in television, movies, and documentaries to make art for art's sake, for artists, art that is not meant to be understood. We talked about, is there a space for art's sake? And what space should art hold in our society? We also talked about vibes, the language of vibes, what it means, what it is masking, and how we could get into a better place of communicating our vulnerabilities and issues in our relationships and in our social circles.
Indeed. Well said.
But the conversation doesn't have to end here, guys. We'd love to connect with you guys on social media. Micah, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at j.marie.morgan, and on TikTok now, I think at the same place. Yes.
It's different.
Is it? No, it's just J. Marie Morgan on TikTok.
Do not do the dots.
It'll be someone else. She's a nice lady, but just a very different lady. Where can they find you?
Are you not talking about your threads?
Oh, yeah, I'm on threads too. Yeah, at j.marie.morgan.
There you go. You can find me at Malcolm DOT Media on Instagram and threads. I am on TikTok, but I'm not on TikTok. I'm working my way up to creating content for TikTok. So stick with me, friends. And then you can follow the company Urban Arts Digital at Urban Arts Digital on Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and TikTok. We've been really happy seeing people engage with our content on TikTok and on YouTube. Thank you guys for everything that you guys are doing to help promote the podcast, sharing it, liking it, commenting. We love to see the comments, see people's thoughts about some of these conversations we're having. These conversations are not fun to have on your own. It's fun to have them in community. So please join the conversation.
I think that's it.
That's it. Well, guys, this has been the season 5 finale of Let's Talk About It. Thank you guys for joining us on this journey. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, podcasting and on YouTube. Thank you to you all. I've been Malcolm Morgan.
And I've been Micah Morgan.
And we'll see you next time.